Welcome back to the Chip Shot Football Podcast here on Wednesday, November the 6th. Just recapping some of the games that we couldn't get to yesterday because of the elections. There was no show yesterday, so getting to it a day later, I had to bring up this game between the Rams and the Seahawks because really all NFC West games so far this year have been extremely entertaining, at least if not for the entire game or for most of it. There was that one Cardinals and Rams game that just got really out of hand, and the Cardinals surprised everybody by just beating the heck out of the Rams in week 2, I believe. So, but for the most part, all these games, like the Seahawks 49ers, this game, the Rams and the 49ers game, right? The Cardinals and the 49ers game, they've all been very entertaining for all these games. So we've seen some surprises. We've seen a lot of high-scoring games. The Seahawks and the 49ers game, if I didn't mention that one. All these games have been awesome, and this one fit the bill extremely well. And because it took overtime for the Rams to win this game, right? I believe the first overtime game in these divisional games that it was decided in overtime. So it was another wrinkle in all these games and how they've all played out. And the Rams, like most of you know, walked it off in overtime. Matthew Stafford threw a dime to Demarcus Robinson to win 26-20. The Rams get their third straight win to come back from starting the season 1-4. They're now sitting at 4-4 and second in the division up until this point. While the Seahawks, on the other end of the spectrum, lose their second straight game. They drop to 4-5 and slide to last place in the division. Unfortunately, this is their first time that they find themselves under 500 all season, so they're now going into their bye week, so it is a good time to kind of regroup everything, not really panic, but you have now a break where things might not be going your way. This break definitely does them a lot more good than bad, and trying to just regather everything and fix some of the problems to still be in this race, right? Maybe if they don't win the division, certainly a playoff spot is in contention. But in this game, we didn't really see the Seahawks at full strength because there was no DK Metcalf in this game for them after getting injured last week against the Falcons. But Jackson, Smith, and Jigba had a great game for them to keep Seattle in this game or give them something back with the lack of DK Metcalf not being out there for the Seahawks. So that was great to see Jackson, Smith, and Jigba contributing. But also, talking about wide receivers not really putting their mark on this game, Puka was in this game for a little bit, but then he got ejected in this game for throwing a punch at Seattle's Dodson. And at this point, the Rams, the first half was very weird, very low scoring, very ugly anyway. And then just out of nowhere, I'm watching the game and I see Puka getting ejected. And Puka, obviously, I don't know him, but just from looking at him, from how he is as a player, some interviews that he does, doesn't look like a guy that's confrontational or in your face or really just angry or really emotional like that. So for him to get ejected, I was very confused at what was going on. But yeah, a very weird game overall. But, like we mentioned and briefly mentioned there, Jackson Smith and Jigba, his massive game. He had 7 receptions for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. Tyler Lockett contributed with 63 yards and a touchdown as well. Kenneth Walker, 83 yards and 25 carries. Another solid game from him. And Geno Smith throwing for almost 400 yards in another game. 3 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions, which we're going to get to in just a little bit. Whereas the Rams, a much cleaner game for Stafford. 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. 298 yards. Kyren Williams, pretty quiet game for him, 69 yards, but still pretty effective. But Cooper Kupp had a great game, 11 receptions, 104 yards. Demarcus Robinson was the hero, right, with 6 receptions, 94 yards, and 2 touchdowns, stepping up for the absence of Puka Nacua. So looking at how this game played out, ultimately, the first half, right, very, very misleading as to this game and what it really meant going into the second half, right? Because in the first half, absolute dud of a game because there was 8 punts between both of these teams to start the game. And Seattle also threw an interception in there as well. So just very ugly football being played until eventually the Rams took the lead 3-0. But Seattle responded with a touchdown late in the first half to make it 3-7. But the Rams followed that with their own interception, and Seattle scored another touchdown after that. So the Seahawks are feeling good at home. They're going into halftime 13-3. Then still, this game was far from finished because the Rams came back into the game and scored a touchdown to start the second half. So it's still a very close game, 10-13 at this point. And I thought when it's 10-13 and both teams, after coming off of a first half where everyone seems to be struggling, I thought that the Rams snatched all the momentum when they had that 103-yard pick six returned by Kamren Kinchens, the safety, I believe, for the Rams. He intercepted Geno Smith in the end zone, and he returned that whole thing. He ran the length of the field, and at that point, the Rams, after also tagging on a field goal to make it 13-13, now they led after that pick six touchdown 20-13, and from being down 13-3, they scored 17 unanswered points. And I thought at that point that the Rams finally clicked it, got it all into motion, and the Seahawks were just not going to be able to respond. And Seattle actually had a chance right after that to get back into the game because they blocked a punt, but Geno Smith threw another interception in the red zone, just a killer. And then at that point, I'm also thinking if the game's already not over, this one definitely sealed it. But to Seattle's credit, they didn't roll over, they didn't give up, they stayed resilient, and they tied the game up finally at 20-20 with 51 seconds left in regulation. Nothing else happened for the remaining 51 seconds, and Seattle actually got the ball first in overtime. So you're thinking at that moment, like, wow, Seattle, despite throwing the interceptions and the game being overall sloppy, the Seahawks might have a chance to steal this game from the Rams. But the defense for the Rams stopped the Seahawks on a crucial fourth down. Critical of the Seahawks because they were in field goal range at that point. So it goes back to the Buccaneers' decision, right, to go for 2 points here. Maybe was it a little bit too aggressive to go for it on fourth down? Because if you kick a 3 there, the Rams end up scoring a touchdown anyway, so it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But maybe kicking a field goal there, it affects how the Rams approach their following drive, knowing that they only need a field goal. Maybe they don't take that shot. Maybe they're not so aggressive with it. They settle for a field goal as well. I'm thinking in hindsight, obviously, we don't know what would have happened, but, it ends up costing them because not getting that fourth down, they don't do anything with the ball, and then, of course, the Rams go down, and Stafford throws that great pass to Demarcus Robinson. They win the game, and they go to 4-4. So, really, it was a great game. If anything that I learned for the Rams in this game is that they can score with any team. And Puka Nacua wasn't playing in this game pretty much for the majority of it. And still, they get guys to contribute. Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, Puka when he's there, Parkinson, their tight end, Kyron. They can get guys to contribute. When Puka and when Cooper Kupp aren't there, those other guys step up. Tutu Atwell is another one. And when those guys are in there, they get a majority of the looks, and opposing defenses can't really stop them, as a credit to Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, for running this offense so prolifically well. That's really what I took away from this game for the Rams, at least, is that they're going to be a team to watch. They're 4-4, but I would be scared. I would be more scared of them than a lot of these teams in the NFC, just on their personnel, their coaching. They have everything, and their defense doesn't get enough credit, honestly. With guys like Byron Young, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, Kobe Turner, these guys, they're monsters. They changed the game. All of them are either rookies or they're in their second year, and they're impacting the game at such a high rate. And I still feel like a lot of people aren't giving this defense a lot of credit, where just starting with those guys, they do a lot for this defense, and they impact the games each and every week. So the Rams are just as advertised, right? Just as good. But for the Seahawks, my problem stems with just them continuing to hurt themselves in these situations. Their running game one is solid, but the disciplinary stuff, right? The situational moments where you can't have a penalty, where you can't have turnovers like this, they don't really get out of their own way, right? 3 turnovers in this game to the Rams, 1 turnover in this game is obviously a big deal. And also the 12 penalties that Seattle had to Los Angeles is 8 penalties. It's just sloppy football. And they are talented. They have, like, Jackson Smith and Jigba proved his worth again. If people still had doubts about him, you don't have DK Metcalf in this game, but still, you're right there with the Rams. The margin of error is so small because you're missing a guy so impactful like DK Metcalf, and you throw these interceptions, obviously not intentional, but in certain situations, I just think that Geno, whatever the play call is, they got to be a little bit more conservative, not being so aggressive, and just the idea of being a gunslinger and things like that, that teeters on the brink of just being reckless with the ball. And Geno has all these great games with throwing over like 350, 300 yards and whatnot. But at some point, can we have like a 175-yard game, 200-yard game where everything is effective, clean, the running game is looking good, no penalties to hurt yourself, the defense is capable of playing very good, as we saw in this game? When are we going to see a game like that? That's really the next step that I think the Seahawks need to take, because these games are fun. They're always entertaining games, but it always feels like they're on the wrong end of them when they throw turnovers and the penalties and things like that. So I just don't know what I'm going to get from the Seahawks team, and hopefully they kind of tone it down a little bit and just become a bit more effective, not night and day, after just 1 week of being on a bye, but just toning it down just a little bit and being more cautious, more conservative, I think could be a good thing for this team, because they are talented. I just think at some times they're a little bit all over the place when you have calm, cool, collected teams on the other side, led by McVay, like a Shanahan, like a Dan Quinn, Dan Campbell, these guys that execute at the highest level. That's the difference I see right now with the Seahawks. So once they fix that, they have proven they can be competitive. So they just need to take that next step, and they'll be in a good spot going forward. But overall, it was a great game, and we're going to leave that game there and quickly go over to our last segment on today's show. We got to talk about Sunday Night Football here quickly, because it was a good game overall for the Vikings to get back into the win column, but the Colts finding themselves in a weird spot here with Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson after a disappointing performance on this past Sunday night. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back quickly and talk about Sunday Night Football.